In the cramped two-bedroom apartment in Queens, Marcus Hayes stared at the eviction notice taped to his door. 14 days. The number glared back at him like an accusation, like proof of every failure that had led him here. Behind him, 6-year-old Emma hummed while coloring at the kitchen table, her worn crayons creating butterflies that would never fly beyond the cheap paper. She looked up, brown curls falling across eyes the same shade of blue as her mother's. "Daddy, can we have chicken nuggets tonight?" Marcus glanced at his phone. Bank balance, $47. Rent due in 2 weeks, $1,850. The math didn't work. It hadn't worked for months. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart." Emma nodded without complaint, returning to her butterflies. She'd learned not to ask for much. 6 years old and already too good at reading the tension in his shoulders, the way he stared at bills too long, the careful rationing of everything from food to hope. That knowledge sat in Marcus's chest like a stone. The laptop screen cast blue light across the kitchen table, where 17 rejection emails filled his inbox. Each one a variation of the same message. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." Translation: a 7-month gap in his resume and a reference from his last employer that probably said, "left due to performance issues," in the politest possible corporate speak. Marcus was 35 years old. He'd been a competent executive assistant at Anderson and Partners for 6 years before everything fell apart. Before Lauren died and the grief swallowed him whole, and he showed up to work unable to remember simple tasks, missing deadlines, forgetting meetings. Before his boss called him in with that expression people wear when they're about to end your livelihood with compassion. The clock read 11:45 p.m. Emma should have been asleep an hour ago, but the building's heat was broken again, and Marcus had given her his extra blanket. He'd sleep in his jacket tonight. Again. His laptop search brought up job listings he'd already seen, already applied to, already been rejected from. Then something new appeared, posted 18 minutes ago. Personal assistant to CEO. Chen Technologies. $95,000 year. The salary made his breath catch. 95,000 would mean Emma could have new shoes, the ones without the sole peeling away. Would mean real groceries instead of rationing eggs until Thursday. Would mean keeping this apartment, terrible heat and all. Below the listing, a note in red text. High turnover. Over 120 assistants in 2 years. Only serious candidates apply. Red flags didn't get much redder. Someone who'd burned through that many employees wasn't just demanding. They were impossible. But Marcus looked at Emma's jacket hanging by the door, 2 sizes too small and held together with duct tape over a torn seam. He looked at the eviction notice. He looked at the number 47 on his phone screen. He clicked the application link and uploaded his resume, thin as it was, wrote a cover letter that said nothing about being desperate, everything about being reliable. Sent it at 11:52 p.m. and closed the laptop, not allowing himself to hope. Emma stirred at the table, fighting sleep. "Come on, baby girl. Bedtime." He carried her to the bedroom they shared, tucked her into the twin bed that had been hers since she was 3. Since before Lauren died and their lives imploded, and Marcus learned that grief doesn't follow any reasonable timeline, just keeps hitting you in waves when you least expect it. Emma's hand found his. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." He waited until her breathing evened out before returning to the kitchen, staring at the eviction notice again. 14 days. He'd apply to 10 more jobs tomorrow. 20. However many it took. His phone buzzed at 7:15 the next morning. Unknown number. The voice on the other end was crisp, female, with the kind of authority that suggested she'd never had to repeat herself. "Mr. Hayes, this is Margaret Sullivan calling on behalf of Victoria Chen. Ms. Chen would like to interview you this morning at 9:30. The address is 847 East 71st Street. Please arrive promptly." Marcus's brain struggled to catch up. Yes, I'll be there." The line went dead. East 71st Street, Upper East Side. The kind of neighborhood where Marcus's entire apartment could fit in someone's coat closet. He had 2 hours to drop Emma at school, subway to Manhattan, and somehow present as the kind of person who belonged in that world. The suit he'd worn to 17 failed interviews hung in the closet, wrinkled but clean. He pressed it with an iron that sputtered and died halfway through, leaving creases he couldn't fix. His good shoes had a scuff on the left toe that no amount of polish could hide. But it was this or nothing, and nothing wasn't an option. Emma ate cereal for breakfast, the last of the box. "You have an interview, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. A good one, I think." "You'll get it. You're really smart." The faith in her voice nearly broke him. The subway ride took 40 minutes, Marcus clutching a folder with extra copies of his resume that probably wouldn't matter but felt necessary anyway. At 72nd Street, he emerged into a different New York than the one he lived in. Doormen in uniforms, trees planted in careful rows, buildings that whispered old money and generational wealth. Number 847 was a brownstone that probably cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. 4 stories of pristine brick and perfectly maintained stonework. Windows that gleamed, a black iron gate that looked both decorative and designed to keep people like him outside. He pressed the intercom at 7:28, too terrified of being late to risk cutting it close. A camera swiveled toward him. Then a buzz, and the gate clicked open. The entryway had marble floors that reflected light from a chandelier overhead. Original artwork lined the walls, pieces Marcus recognized from magazines he used to buy before everything became a calculation of necessity versus survival. A curved staircase led upward, but a door to the right stood open, revealing a hallway. The woman who appeared matched the voice from the phone. Margaret Sullivan looked about 55, silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. Her expression suggested she'd seen 1,000 desperate men walk through this door and watch them all fail. "Mr. Hayes?" Not a question. A confirmation that he met whatever low expectations she'd already formed. "Yes, ma'am." "Follow me, and whatever you do, don't waste Miss On. The hallway extended past rooms Marcus caught glimpses of. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a kitchen with commercial-grade appliances. Spaces that spoke of wealth so casual it didn't need to announce itself. The hallway opened into a large study converted into an accessible office. Doorways wide enough for a wheelchair. Shelves lowered for easier reach. Equipment he didn't recognize, but that looked medical and expensive. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Victoria Chen. The photos from his frantic late-night research hadn't captured her properly. 30 years old, but her steel-gray eyes held authority that belonged to someone who'd commanded boardrooms since before she could legally drink. Black hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. A suit in charcoal that probably cost more than Marcus's security deposit. And the state-of-the-art wheelchair that she sat in, with the posture of someone who refused to let it define her. Everything about her screamed power except for the barely visible tremor in her left hand that she quickly pressed flat against the desk. "Sit." Not an invitation, a command that expected immediate compliance. Marcus sat, trying not to let his cheap suit creak too loudly against the leather chair. Victoria didn't look at his resume. She looked at him, really looked at him, the way someone might examine a specimen under a microscope, reading every failure, every desperate moment, every sleepless night written across his face. "Tell me why you think you can do this job when more than 120 other people couldn't." The silence that followed felt like drowning. Marcus had prepared for this question during the subway ride. He had answers memorized about organizational skills, attention to detail, his experience as an executive assistant at Anderson and Partners. Professional answers. Safe answers that highlighted competencies without revealing the desperation underneath. But something about the way Victoria looked at him, with exhaustion beneath the hardness, with loneliness he recognized from his own mirror, made those prepared answers die in his throat. He saw something in her eyes, not pity, not curiosity, something that looked like exhaustion from holding up a facade too long, like she was tired of people performing for her, saying what they thought she wanted to hear. The truth came out quieter than he'd intended. "I can't promise I'll be better than them. I don't know what made them leave." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Permission, maybe, or recognition. "But I can promise you that I will show up every single day and give you everything I have. Because if I don't succeed at this job, my daughter Emma and I will lose our apartment in 14 days. We'll have nothing." He met her gaze directly, past the point of caring about professionalism or maintaining appropriate boundaries. "So whatever you need from me, Difficult hours, complex tasks, patience you think I might not have, I'll find a way to deliver it. Not because I'm special or uniquely qualified, but because I don't have any other choice. And sometimes that's the strongest motivation a person can have. The silence that followed felt eternal. Victoria's fingers drummed once against the desk, a rhythm that might have been thought or judgment or something else entirely. Then she laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh, but it wasn't entirely cruel either. It was the laugh of someone who'd recognized something familiar. Perhaps another person who had been broken by life and forced to rebuild with whatever pieces remained. Everyone who sits in that chair tries to impress me. Her voice carried the weight of those 120 failures. They tell me about their credentials, their flexibility, their passion for accessibility work. They last 3 days before they realize that working for someone like me isn't inspiring. It's exhausting. She paused, and Marcus saw something flicker across her face. Pain, maybe, or the memory of every person who'd walked away. I'm demanding, particular. I have bad days when the pain makes me impossible to be around. I need help with things that make people uncomfortable. Personal things, intimate things. Most people can't handle the reality of what this job actually requires. She leaned forward, and for a brief moment, Marcus saw past the armor. He saw a young woman who'd had her whole life stolen by circumstance. Someone who'd probably watched people walk away over and over again. Not just employees, but friends, maybe family. You're the first person who's been honest enough to admit you're desperate. Victoria's hands folded on the desk, steady now. So here's my offer. 2-week trial. You show up every day at 7:30 in the morning. You leave when I dismiss you, but not later than 3:30, so you can pick up your daughter. You do exactly what I tell you without question or complaint. If you make it through 2 weeks, we'll discuss a permanent arrangement. The salary is $95,000 annually, plus health insurance that covers dependents, full medical, dental, and vision. Marcus's breath caught in his chest. That salary would change everything. Emma's field trips, school supplies, real groceries, the kind where you don't count every item, keeping their apartment, heat that worked. I'll take it. The words came out without hesitation, without thought, driven by the image of Emma's too small jacket and the eviction notice and the number 47. Victoria's eyebrow raised slightly. You haven't heard the worst parts yet. Something almost like concern crossed her face. So brief Marcus might have imagined it. It doesn't matter. I'll take it. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. The steel in her eyes softened just slightly, and Marcus realized that beneath all that armor was someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone choose to stay. Be here tomorrow morning at 7:30 sharp. And Mr. Hayes? She held his gaze, and in that moment they were just two people who understood what it meant to lose everything. Don't make me regret this. I won't. I promise you I won't. Victoria nodded once, dismissing him with the efficiency of someone who valued time above comfort. As Marcus stood to leave, she stopped him with one more question. Your daughter, how old is she? 6. Her name is Emma. Something unreadable crossed Victoria's face. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the person underneath. If you need to leave by 3:30 to pick her up, we'll make it work. I'm not a monster, whatever people say about me. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. This woman, with all her wealth and success and impossible reputation, had just shown him more consideration than any interviewer in the past 7 months. More than his former boss who'd let him go with 2 weeks severance and a sympathetic handshake. More than the unemployment office worker who'd processed his claim with dead eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. Margaret appeared in the doorway as if summoned, her expression unchanged, but somehow conveying that Marcus's time was up. She led him back through the brownstone, past the markers of wealth he'd never possessed, and showed him to the door without another word. On the subway back to Queens, Marcus's hands shook. Not from fear, from the fragile, dangerous thing that felt like hope. That evening, after picking up Emma from the after-school program run by a church that charged on a sliding scale he could barely afford, he made mac and cheese from a box. Emma's favorite, though they'd eaten it 4 times this week already. Daddy, did you get the job? Her eyes, so much like Lauren's, watched him with the careful attention of a child who'd learned to read adult emotions for signs of incoming disaster. I got a trial. 2 weeks. If I do well, then I get the real job. Emma's face lit up in a way that made Marcus's throat tight. You'll do well. You're the best at everything. The faith in her voice was both a gift and a weight. He pulled her into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of the discount shampoo they used. I love you, baby girl, more than anything in this whole world. Love you too, Daddy, more than butterflies. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder containing Lauren's things. Her nursing license, a photo from their wedding, both of them young and stupid with optimism, a sympathy card from the hospital where she died, signed by coworkers who'd stopped calling after the funeral. 2.5 years since the aneurysm, since the phone call that shattered his life into before and after, since he'd had to explain to a 3.5-year-old Emma that mommy wasn't coming home, watching his daughter's face crumple as she asked why in that way children do when the world stops making sense. Lauren had been a physical therapist. She'd spent her days helping people recover from injuries, teaching them how to regain what they'd lost. The irony of her dying from something sudden and unpreventable wasn't lost on Marcus. No amount of therapy, no amount of rehabilitation could bring her back. He'd blamed himself. Still did in the quiet hours. She'd complained about headaches for months. He told her to take ibuprofen, rest more, stop stressing about work. What if he'd insisted she see a doctor? What if he'd recognized the signs? The grief therapist Emma's school counselor had recommended, when Marcus could afford the copay, said that kind of thinking was normal, that survivor's guilt was part of the process. But knowing something was normal didn't make it hurt less. Marcus closed the folder and put it away. Tomorrow he'd start at Chen Technologies. Tomorrow he'd show Victoria Chen that desperate men could be reliable. Tomorrow he'd begin rebuilding what had crumbled. He arrived at 7:25 the next morning, too terrified of being late to risk cutting it close. Margaret met him at the door with the same severe expression, as if his punctuality was exactly what she'd expected and thus unremarkable. Ms. Chen rises at 6 for her morning therapy routine. She handles that independently. Breakfast is at 7:45 sharp. You'll coordinate her schedule, manage her correspondence, accompany her to all meetings, and handle any additional tasks she assigns. Questions? No, ma'am. Good. Don't touch anything without permission. Don't ask personal questions. Don't expect praise. If she's satisfied with your work, you'll know because you'll still be employed tomorrow. Margaret led him through the brownstone's first floor, pointing out what he'd need to know. The kitchen, larger than Marcus's entire apartment, with specific instructions about Victoria's coffee preferences. The conference room where video calls happen, the accessible bathroom, the medical supply closet. The red days on her calendar are when the pain is worse, when you'll need to be particularly patient. Marcus studied the calendar Margaret pulled up on a tablet. Red days scattered throughout like warnings. What are the red days exactly? Margaret's expression tightened, the first crack in her professional facade. Days when the pain from her injury is worse than usual. Days when most assistants quit. Days when you'll need to remember that, however difficult she seems, she's dealing with something you can't begin to understand. The morning passed in a blur of tasks designed to test competence. Victoria's schedule required juggling board meetings, physical therapy appointments, conference calls with international partners, and what Margaret cryptically referred to as personal appointments that weren't to be questioned. Marcus studied the schedule like it was a code to be cracked, memorizing not just times but patterns. Victoria worked best in early mornings, her calendar showed. Afternoons were lighter, probably when pain or fatigue accumulated. The red days never had afternoon meetings scheduled at all. At 7:44, Marcus positioned himself outside Victoria's office. Coffee prepared exactly as Margaret had specified. Black, no sugar, in the blue ceramic mug from the third shelf in the kitchen cabinet. 1 minute later, Victoria wheeled into the office dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent used to be. Coffee, not a request, an expectation that he would deliver correctly. Marcus handed her the mug. Victoria took it without comment, No thank you or acknowledgement, just the acceptance of a task completed to standard. She took a sip, and Marcus held his breath, but she said nothing, which meant it was right. The morning continued in that vein. Short commands, immediate execution, zero feedback. Marcus scheduled a conference call with a manufacturing partner in Shenzhen, printed documents for a board meeting, making sure every page aligned perfectly, no margins off by even a millimeter. Fielded emails from her executive team at Chen Technologies, the company she'd built from nothing after dropping out of MIT at 19. He'd researched her last night, staying up until 2, despite the exhaustion. Victoria Chen, tech prodigy, self-made millionaire by 25, CEO of a company specializing in accessibility software and adaptive devices. Then at 28, the horseback riding an accident during a corporate retreat, paralyzed from mid-chest down 2 years ago, the same amount of time since Lauren died. The parallel sat uncomfortably in Marcus's mind, two people whose lives had been split into before and after by events no one could have predicted or prevented. Victoria was reviewing a presentation when she spoke without looking up. This slide is wrong. The market projection uses outdated data. Pull the latest numbers from the Q2 report and update it. I need it done in 20 minutes. Marcus's pulse spiked. He hadn't used this kind of software in 7 months. Not since his last day at Anderson & Partners, when his boss had walked him out with a box of desk belongings and wishes for better days ahead. But muscle memory was a strange thing. His fingers found the file system, located the Q2 report, cross-referenced the market data with industry benchmarks, and rebuilt the slide with formatting that matched Victoria's existing template. 18 minutes. He showed it to Victoria, and she studied the screen with the same intense focus she brought to everything. The silence stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if he'd missed something, made an error that would end this before it started. Acceptable. That single word delivered in a flat tone shouldn't have meant anything. But Marcus felt absurdly proud, like he'd passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. The rest of the day followed a rhythm. Victoria issued instructions. Marcus executed them. No praise, no criticism, unless something needed correction. Just the steady accumulation of tasks completed to her exacting standards. By 3:15, his mind felt wrung out from concentration, from the constant vigilance required to anticipate needs and avoid mistakes. You can leave at 3:30 to pick up your daughter. Victoria didn't look up from her screen, making the permission sound like a dismissal. Thank you. He gathered his things, this job too new to risk being late for Emma, and left Victoria still working in the office that probably saw her until 8 or 9 most nights. The first 3 days passed like that. Marcus arrived at 7:25 each morning, stayed until 3:25 each afternoon, and learned the patterns of Victoria's world. How she liked her office temperature at exactly 68 degrees. How documents needed to be printed single-sided, never double, because she reviewed them with a specific system. How phone calls from board members always got through, but salespeople never did. On the 4th day, Marcus arrived to find Margaret waiting with an expression that might have been sympathy on anyone else's face. She's having a bad morning. The words carried weight, like a warning before battle. Physical therapy session didn't go well. The pain is worse than usual. If you can't handle it, now's the time to leave. Marcus thought about Emma's excitement last night when he told her about the job, how she'd asked if they could afford the Science Museum field trip next month. $30 he didn't have yet, but might soon. I'm not leaving. Margaret studied him for a long moment, then nodded. We'll see. When Marcus entered the office, Victoria was at her desk, but everything about her posture screamed pain. Her jaw was tight, movements careful and controlled, and when she looked up at him, her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion that went beyond lack of sleep. I need my medication. Second drawer, left side of the desk. Her voice came out clipped, sharp-edged with strain. Marcus found the bottle quickly, along with the glass of water he'd learned to keep filled on the credenza. He set both on the desk within her reach. I don't need you hovering. Just do your job. The words had bite. Marcus stepped back, giving her space, and returned to his desk in the corner. The morning was brutal. Victoria's usual sharp commands became cutting criticisms. The coffee he brought was too hot, though he'd prepared it exactly as always. The schedule he'd organized was wrong. though he'd structured it identically to the previous 3 days. The email he drafted was juvenile and needed to be completely rewritten. He rewrote it. She found fault. He rewrote it again, changing phrasing, adjusting tone. Still not right. The third version she accepted with a dismissive wave that said it would do. Barely. By noon, Marcus understood why people quit. This wasn't just demanding. This was impossible. A moving target where nothing was good enough, where every task carried the weight of potential failure. But something kept him from walking out. Maybe it was the way Victoria's hand trembled when she reached for her coffee cup. Maybe it was the tightness around her eyes that spoke of pain he couldn't imagine. Maybe it was the flash of something that looked like regret when she snapped at him for the 6th time that hour. Or maybe it was the memory of Emma this morning, asking if they could have pancakes for dinner because they hadn't had those in forever. At 1:30, Victoria spoke without preamble. "I have an investor meeting in an hour. You'll need to drive me." Marcus blinked, recalibrating. "Drive you? Do you not have a license, Mr. Hayes?" The sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. "No, I do. Yes, I'll get the car ready." The accessible van was parked in a private garage behind the brownstone. Margaret showed him how to operate the wheelchair lift, how to secure the chair properly, and within 20 minutes they were navigating Manhattan traffic toward a glass tower in Midtown. Marcus had forgotten what this felt like, being part of something important, sitting in traffic on the way to a meeting that mattered, where decisions would be made and money would change hands and the world of business would continue its relentless turning. 7 months of survival mode had shrunk his world down to the space between eviction notices and Emma's needs. This reminded him there was something larger. "You're quiet." Victoria's observation came from the passenger seat, her voice less sharp than it had been all morning. "I'm concentrating on driving," which was partially true. Manhattan traffic required attention. But mostly he was trying not to think about how this woman, in pain and frustrated and dealing with things he couldn't comprehend, was still about to walk into a meeting and command a room. "Everyone talks to me. They try to fill the silence with small talk or questions they think I want to answer. You don't." Marcus glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "Would you prefer if I did?" "No, I wouldn't." Something in her tone shifted, warmer than before. Not quite approval, but close. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when Marcus helped her from the van and they entered the building, Victoria transformed. The woman who'd been sharp and brittle all morning became someone else entirely. Confident, commanding, brilliant in a way that made investors lean forward in their chairs. The conference room overlooked Central Park, floor-to-ceiling windows framing green space in the middle of concrete and steel. Marcus helped Victoria set up her presentation materials, then took a seat in the back corner as instructed. Watching as she presented Chen Technologies' latest accessibility software with the kind of passion that could move mountains, or at least move money. When one investor asked about her condition, whether it affected her ability to lead long-term, Victoria's smile turned razor sharp. "My paralysis affects my legs, not my mind, and it gave me first-hand experience with the exact market we're serving. I'd argue that makes me more qualified, not less. I built a $340 million company while attending physical therapy 3 times a week. Can you say the same?" The investor had the grace to look embarrassed. The room fell silent. Then another investor cleared his throat. "That's the kind of determination we're looking for. You have our investment, Miss Chen." On the drive back, Victoria was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, less brittle, less guarded. As they pulled into the garage, she spoke without looking at him. "You did well today." Marcus nearly swerved, catching himself at the last second. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head, Mr. Hayes. You're still on trial." But there was something almost playful in her tone, and when Marcus met her eyes in the rearview mirror, he saw the armor had cracked just slightly. The 2-week trial period crawled and flew simultaneously. Marcus showed up every day at 7:25, left at 3:25 to pick up Emma, and handled every impossible task Victoria threw at him. He survived 3 more bad mornings, learning to recognize the signs before she snapped. The way she rubbed her left wrist, the tightness around her mouth, the careful way she moved that spoke of pain she was trying to control. He learned to anticipate her needs before she voiced them. Coffee ready before she asked. Documents printed and organized before meetings. Calls screened and emails prioritized according to a system he'd decoded through observation and careful attention. He also started to notice other things. The way Victoria stared out the window sometimes when she thought no one was looking, her expression distant and achingly lonely. The way she tensed before asking for help with something, as if expecting rejection or judgment. The way she spoke to her physical therapist on the phone, her voice professional, but with an undercurrent of desperation that suggested hope was a dangerous thing to hold on to. On a Friday afternoon of the second week, Victoria called him into her office at 2:30 earlier than usual. Marcus's stomach dropped. This was it. He'd failed somehow, made some error he hadn't caught, and she was letting him go. Victoria sat behind her desk, expression unreadable. You've made it 2 weeks. That's longer than 80% of your predecessors. Marcus waited, barely breathing, hands gripping the arms of the chair hard enough that his knuckles went white. The permanent position is yours if you want it. $95,000 annually. Health insurance, medical, dental, and vision for you and your daughter. 2 weeks paid vacation, standard holidays. Hours will be 7:30 to 3:30, Monday through Friday, with occasional evening or weekend work as needed. I'll provide at least 48 hours notice for anything outside regular hours. Marcus's breath caught. The salary would change everything. Emma's field trip, new shoes, the backpack she wanted with the butterfly design, groceries without counting every item, paying off the eviction notice, and having enough left over for heat that actually worked. But Victoria wasn't finished. I should tell you that this job won't get easier. There will be more bad days, more moments when I'm impossible to work with, more times when you'll wonder why you're putting up with this. She paused and something shifted in her expression. The steel softened just enough that Marcus could see the person underneath. Brilliant and prickly, determined not to need anyone to the point where she'd forgotten how to let someone care. But you've earned this position, Mr. Hayes. You showed up every day. You have been reliable, and you haven't treated me like I'm fragile or broken. You treat me like a person who happens to need assistance, not like an invalid who needs pity. That's worth more than you know. Marcus thought about the eviction notice he could finally pay off, about Emma's excitement when he told her they could stay in their apartment, about having enough money for heat and food and all the small securities he'd taken for granted before Lauren died and everything fell apart. But he also thought about the woman sitting across from him, who'd given him a chance when no one else would, who'd shown him consideration about picking up Emma when 17 other interviews hadn't cared about his circumstances at all. Yes, I want this job. His voice came out firm, certain in a way he hadn't felt about anything in years. Victoria extended her hand across the desk. Marcus shook it, surprised by how strong her grip was. You can call me Victoria now. We're past the formal stage. Something warm unfurled in Marcus's chest, hope mixed with relief, mixed with the fragile beginning of something that might eventually be called belonging. Then you should call me Marcus. The smallest smile touched Victoria's lips, transforming her face into something almost soft. All right then, Marcus. Welcome to Chen Technologies. That evening, Marcus picked up Emma from the church's after-school program and took her to the bodega on their corner. He let her pick out whatever she wanted for dinner, within reason, and watched her face light up when she chose chicken nuggets and juice boxes and a chocolate bar for dessert. Daddy, did you get the job? She clutched his hand as they walked home, her too small jacket zipped against the November cold. I got the job, baby girl. The real job. We can stay in our apartment, and you can get new shoes, and we'll have chicken nuggets whenever you want. Emma stopped walking, right there on the sidewalk, and looked up at him with Lauren's eyes full of tears. Really? We're okay now? Marcus knelt down on the cold concrete, not caring about his dress pants or the people walking around them, and pulled his daughter into a hug that tried to contain everything he couldn't say. All the fear of the past 7 months, all the nights he'd lain awake calculating impossible math, all the guilt about what he couldn't provide for her. Yeah, sweetheart, we're okay now, I promise. That night, after Emma fell asleep with chocolate still on her fingers, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and pulled out his journal. Lauren had given it to him on their 5th anniversary, insisting he needed a place to write down his thoughts. He'd used it sporadically over the years, mostly for grocery lists and Emma's school dates. Tonight, he wrote something different. Today, I started a job that might actually save us. Victoria Chen is impossible and brilliant and more alone than anyone I have ever met. She sees something in me I'm not sure exists, but I'm going to do everything I can to prove she was right, to take a chance on a desperate man with nothing to offer but honesty. For the first time since Lauren died, I feel like maybe I'm not just surviving. Maybe I'm beginning to live again. He closed the journal and put it away, then checked the lock on the door twice, a habit from the months of worry. Tomorrow, he'd start his first full week at Chen Technologies. Tomorrow, he'd continue proving that desperate men could be reliable. Tomorrow would come, and he'd face it. But tonight, Emma was safe and warm in bed, and there was food in the kitchen, and the eviction notice could be paid off. Tonight, for the first time in what felt like forever, Marcus let himself hope that the worst might finally be over. The rhythm of the next 3 months settled into something Marcus hadn't expected: stability. Each morning he arrived at the brownstone 25 minutes early, using the time to prepare Victoria's office exactly as she preferred. Each evening he left precisely on schedule to collect Emma from school, carrying home the satisfaction of tasks completed well. Between those anchors, the days filled with work that demanded every bit of skill he possessed, and occasionally more than he thought he had. February brought snow that turned Manhattan into something almost beautiful, softening the hard edges of buildings and muffling the constant noise. Marcus learned to navigate icy streets with the van, learned which routes avoided the worst traffic, learned to read Victoria's micro-expressions for signs of what kind of day lay ahead. She was demanding in ways that went beyond the job description Margaret had outlined. Every email needed to be perfectly crafted, balancing professional courtesy with the underlying steel that made Chen Technologies' competitors think twice. Every meeting required preparation that went 3 layers deep, not just the agenda and materials, but anticipated questions and prepared responses and backup data in case the conversation went sideways. But Victoria was also fair. When Marcus worked late to solve a problem, she noticed. When he caught an error in a contract before it went to legal, she acknowledged it with a nod that felt like a medal. When Emma's school called about a possible flu outbreak and Marcus mentioned needing to leave early to pick her up, Victoria simply adjusted the afternoon schedule without making him feel like a burden. Late one evening in mid-February, they were preparing for a major presentation to potential investors. 9 o'clock, the brownstone quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic. Marcus had been refining slides for 2 hours, making sure every data point aligned with the narrative Victoria wanted to tell. Victoria broke the silence with a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "How long were you married?" Marcus looked up from the laptop, surprised by the personal turn. 3 months of working together, and their conversations had stayed carefully professional, bounded by the clear lines of employer and employee. 8 years. We met in college. I was finishing my business degree, and Lauren was studying physical therapy. Victoria's fingers stilled on her keyboard. "Lauren, that's a beautiful name." The ache in Marcus's chest had softened over time, grief worn smooth like a stone in a river. Still there, still heavy, but no longer sharp enough to cut. She was amazing. Smart, funny, ridiculously patient with me when I stressed about exams or job interviews. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Victoria's expression shifted, the professional mask slipping to reveal something more human underneath. "What happened?" Marcus set down his laptop, the presentation suddenly less important than this moment of connection. "Brain aneurysm. 2.5 years ago, she was working at a rehabilitation center, treating a patient in the hydrotherapy pool when she had a sudden seizure. By the time the paramedics got her to the hospital," he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Victoria's eyes held understanding that came from knowing how quickly everything could change, how life could be split into before and after by events no one saw coming. "I'm sorry, Marcus. That's devastating." The worst part was telling Emma. She was only 4. How do you explain death to a 4-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that mommy isn't coming home? Ever? and make it make sense when it doesn't make sense to you either. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. I don't know, but from what I've seen, you're doing an incredible job with her. Marcus felt something tighten in his throat. Praise from Victoria was rare enough that it landed with weight. Thank you, that means a lot. She's the only reason I kept going after Lauren died. Some mornings I didn't want to get out of bed, but Emma needed breakfast and school and someone to read her stories about butterflies. You can't fall apart when a 4-year-old is counting on you. Victoria nodded, and Marcus saw recognition in her eyes, the knowledge of what it meant to keep functioning when everything inside was broken. Tell me about her. What's Emma like? The question felt like an invitation to share something precious. Marcus found himself smiling, the real kind that hadn't come easily in years. She's incredible. 6 years old and already reading at a 3rd grade level. She's obsessed with butterflies and asks approximately 200 questions an hour about how things work. Loves dancing even though we can't afford lessons. She's empathetic in this way that sometimes scares me. She can read emotions better than most adults I know. She sounds wonderful. Victoria's voice carried genuine warmth, and Marcus realized they'd crossed some invisible line. This wasn't a boss asking polite questions about an employee's life. This was one person seeing another person's full humanity. She is. She's everything good that came from my marriage to Lauren. The living proof that something beautiful can survive even when everything else falls apart. He paused, then added something he hadn't planned to say. This job saved us. I need you to know that. The day you hired me, we were about to lose our apartment. Emma was wearing the same pajamas for 3 days because I couldn't afford laundry detergent. I was rationing groceries, stretching food until my unemployment check arrived. Your willingness to take a chance on a desperate man with a gap in his resume literally saved my daughter's life. Victoria's expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, then something that looked like pain. I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't want you to. I was terrified you'd see me as too desperate, too risky, someone who might crack under pressure because they needed the job too badly. Victoria leaned back in her wheelchair, studying him with those steel gray eyes that seemed to see through every defense. You aren't in this position, Marcus. You show up, you work harder than anyone I've ever employed, and you treat me like a person instead of a condition. That's worth far more than $95,000. It's worth everything. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that felt like recognition. Understanding, connection that went beyond the professional relationship they'd carefully maintained. Marcus took a breath, then asked the question that had been building for weeks. Can I ask you something? Victoria's lips curved slightly. You just did, but go ahead. Why did you hire me? Really? You must have had candidates with better qualifications, no gaps in their employment history, people who weren't one paycheck away from homelessness. Victoria was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. Because you were the first person who looked at me and saw someone worth staying for. Not the wheelchair, not the money, not the challenge of working for an impossible boss. You saw me. She held his gaze, and Marcus saw vulnerability beneath the armor she wore. Everyone else who walks through that door sees Victoria Chen, the Paralyzed tech CEO. They see someone to pity, or someone to be inspired by, or someone to prove themselves against. But you saw someone who needed help, and you needed a chance. And maybe I was hoping you would understand what it's like to have your whole life ripped away and have to figure out who you are in the aftermath. I do understand. I really do. Victoria's whisper barely reached him across the desk. I know, that's why you're still here. March brought longer days and the first hints of spring. Emma's school announced a field trip to the Natural History Museum, $30 that Marcus could now afford without the tight anxiety that had defined the previous year. He signed the permission slip and watched Emma's face light up with excitement that made everything, every difficult morning, every impossible task, every moment of doubt, worth it. One Thursday in late March, Marcus's usual childcare arrangement fell through. The neighbor who watched Emma after school called at 2:30, voice thick with flu, apologizing but unable to take Emma that afternoon. School ended at 3. Marcus had meetings scheduled until 5. He found Victoria in her office, reviewing quarterly reports with the kind of intense focus she brought to numbers that would determine the company's trajectory. I have a situation. My childcare fell through, and I need to leave at 3 to pick up Emma from school. I can come back after I get her settled, or work from home, or Victoria cut him off with a gesture. Bring her here. Marcus blinked. Bring her here? Did I stutter? Your daughter can stay here while you finish the day's work. There's plenty of space, and I'm curious to meet this amazing child you talk about. Gratitude and apprehension mixed in Marcus's chest. Emma and Victoria's world of expensive furniture and irreplaceable artwork felt like inviting disaster. But the alternative was leaving work early on a day when Victoria needed him, and that wasn't an option. Thank you. I'll make sure she doesn't disturb anything. Victoria's expression softened in that rare way that transformed her entire face. Marcus, it's fine. Emma arrived at 3:45, her backpack bulging with books and her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. She wore her favorite pink dress, not the one with the stain Marcus had never quite gotten out, but the newer one he'd bought with his first paycheck from Chen Technologies. Her brown curls were pulled back in pigtails she'd insisted on doing herself, slightly crooked, but completed with such determination that Marcus hadn't had the heart to fix them. She walked into Victoria's office with wide eyes, taking in the expensive desk and the technology, and the woman in the wheelchair who watched her with equal curiosity. Are you Daddy's boss? Emma's voice carried that particular blend of shyness and boldness that 6-year-olds manage so well. I am. Victoria wheeled slightly closer, bringing herself to Emma's eye level in a gesture Marcus suspected was deliberate. You're really pretty. Why are you in a wheelchair? Marcus felt heat rush to his face. Emma, we talked about... Victoria held up a hand, amusement flickering in her eyes. It's okay. I was in an accident a few years ago that hurt my spine. Now my legs don't work like they used to, so I use a wheelchair to get around. It helps me go places and do things I couldn't do otherwise. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all new information. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but I'm learning to manage it, and I have good doctors who help. Emma nodded, then delivered her observation with the brutal honesty only children possess. My mommy died because her brain got hurt. Daddy says she's in heaven now, but I think heaven is just a nice way of saying she can't come back. The room went very quiet. Marcus wanted to say something, to smooth over his daughter's directness or apologize for bringing up death in a professional setting. But Victoria's expression had softened into something achingly gentle, and he realized she didn't need him to intervene. I'm sorry about your mommy, Emma. That must be very hard. It is, but Daddy takes really good care of me. He makes funny voices when he reads bedtime stories, and he lets me stay up late on Fridays to watch movies. And he always knows when I'm sad, even when I don't tell him. Victoria glanced at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that looked like respect mixed with something deeper. I bet he does. Your daddy is very good at paying attention to people. Emma brightened, the shadow of grief passing as quickly as it had appeared. Can I color at the table? I brought my butterfly book. Of course, and if you get bored, I have some interesting things on my computer you might like to see. 3 hours later, Marcus looked up from answering emails to find Victoria showing Emma basic coding principles on a tablet. His daughter was completely enthralled, asking questions faster than Victoria could answer them, her usual shyness forgotten in the face of something fascinating. If I tell the computer to make a butterfly jump, how does it know how high? Emma's finger pointed at the screen, where a pixelated butterfly waited for instructions. Great question. You have to give it specific instructions. We call that an algorithm. You tell it exactly how many steps to jump, and the computer follows your directions precisely. Want to try? Yes. Can I make it jump really high? Absolutely. Let me show you how. Marcus watched them together, his daughter and his boss, one teaching and one learning with equal enthusiasm, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what Lauren would have wanted for Emma. Strong women to look up to, brilliant minds to inspire her, gentle guidance that encouraged curiosity instead of shutting it down. And this was what Marcus hadn't let himself want since Lauren died. Connection, warmth, the possibility of something more than just survival. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Victoria without prompting, her small arms wrapping around Victoria's shoulders with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. Can I come back sometime? This was the best day. Victoria looked startled by the hug, but her arms came up to return it carefully. I'd like that very much. In the car, on the way home, Emma asked a question that hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. Daddy, is Miss Victoria lonely? He glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, seeing Lauren's perceptiveness in those blue eyes. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? She smiles with her mouth but not her eyes, like she's pretending to be happy but isn't really. Except when she was teaching me about coding, then her eyes smiled too. Marcus marveled at his daughter's emotional intelligence, the way she could read adults with accuracy that should have been impossible at 6 years old. Loss had taught her to pay attention, to watch for signs of sadness in the people she loved. I think maybe she has been lonely, but maybe she's starting to be less lonely now. Because of us? Emma's hopeful voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't expected. Maybe. Yeah, maybe because of us. April brought an unexpected development. Victoria called Marcus into her office early one Tuesday morning before Margaret had even arrived. The brownstone was quiet, just the two of them in the space they'd shared for 4 months now. Victoria sat behind her desk, but something in her posture was different. Tense, almost afraid. My physical therapist called yesterday. He wants to try a new treatment protocol. It's experimental, painful, and has about a 30% success rate for people with my level of injury. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Success rate for what? Victoria's hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair, knuckles going white. Regaining some sensation. Maybe some movement in my legs. Not full recovery, the doctors are very clear about that, but potentially enough to stand with braces, maybe take steps with support. The hope in her voice was barely controlled, like something wild she was trying to cage before it destroyed her. Are you going to try it? Victoria was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on something beyond the window. I don't know. What if I put myself through months of pain and it doesn't work? What if I let myself hope and then lose all over again? Marcus crossed the office and crouched beside her wheelchair, bringing himself to eye level the way he'd seen her do with Emma. What if it does work? Victoria's eyes met his, and he saw fear there, raw and honest. That might be worse, because then I'd have to grieve all over again for the 2 years I lost. I'd have to face how much I gave up because I was too scared to try. Victoria, you didn't give up anything. You built a company from nothing. You lead a team that respects and follows you. You created technology that helps thousands of people live better lives. That's not giving up. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like cowardice, like I'm too afraid to try because failing would confirm what I already believe about myself. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. She didn't pull away. What do you believe about yourself? Her answer came out barely above a whisper. That I'm broken. That no amount of success or money or achievement can fix what I lost that day on that horse. Marcus's chest tightened with the ache of recognition. The same thing he'd believed about himself after Lauren died. That something fundamental had shattered beyond repair. You're not broken, you're healing. There's a difference. Broken means beyond repair. Healing means the repair is happening, slowly, even when you can't see it. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears she wouldn't let fall. How can you be so sure? Because I'm healing too. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over when Lauren died. I thought I'd never feel anything but grief and fear again. That Emma would grow up with a father who was just going through the motions, pretending to be alive. He squeezed her hand gently, but you gave me a chance when no one else would. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started living instead of just surviving. Started feeling things other than pain, things like purpose and connection and maybe even hope. Victoria's voice broke slightly. Will you be there during the treatments? Every single one, if you want me there. I do. I really do. The treatment started 2 weeks later. Marcus rearranged Victoria's entire schedule to accommodate 3 sessions per week, each lasting 2 hours and leaving her exhausted. The specialized facility was downtown, a converted warehouse filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. After the first session, Victoria sat in careful silence during the drive home, her jaw tight with pain she was trying to control. Marcus didn't push conversation, just drove and let her process whatever she needed to process. After the fourth session in early May, something changed. Marcus was pulling out of the facility's parking lot when Victoria made a sound, low and anguished, halfway between a gasp and a sob. He pulled over into a grocery store parking lot, put the car in park, and turned to face her. "It hurts so much, Marcus. It hurts." Her voice broke, and then she was crying, harsh, painful sobs that she tried to muffle behind her hand. Years of holding everything together, of being strong and controlled and never showing weakness, cracking open all at once. "They're essentially retraining my nervous system. It feels like fire and electricity running through my legs, and I can't tell if it's working or if I'm just torturing myself for nothing." Marcus reached over and took her hand, holding on while she fell apart. He didn't offer platitudes about how it would get better or how the pain meant healing was happening. He didn't try to fix anything, he just stayed. When the crying finally subsided, Victoria wiped her face with shaking hands. "I'm sorry. That was unprofessional." "You're human, Victoria. That's not unprofessional, it's real. And for what it's worth, I'm honored that you trusted me enough to fall apart in front of me." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "No one's seen me cry since the accident. Not my parents, not my friends, not Margaret. Just you. Then I'm glad you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, gratitude mixed with something deeper that made Marcus's heart beat faster. "Thank you for everything, for staying, for being here, for not treating me like I'm made of glass." Over the next month, Marcus was there for every session. He watched through the observation room window as therapists pushed Victoria's body through exercises that looked like torture. Watched her face contort with pain. Watched her refuse to quit even when everything in her screamed to stop. The progress was incremental, frustratingly slow. After 8 sessions, there was no change. After 12, nothing. Victoria grew increasingly frustrated, snapping at Marcus during bad mornings, apologizing during good afternoons, riding an emotional roller coaster that had no clear destination. Emma came to the office twice more in May, and each visit she grew more comfortable with Victoria. She'd curl up on the small sofa in Victoria's office, working on homework while Marcus handled administrative tasks. Sometimes Victoria would help with math problems, explaining concepts in ways that made Emma's face light up with understanding. "Miss V, why do you work so hard?" Emma's question came out of nowhere one afternoon, her homework forgotten. Victoria paused in her typing, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because I want to build things that help people. I got hurt, and it made me realize how many things in the world aren't designed for people who need extra help. So I decided to fix that, one piece of software at a time. That's a good reason. Daddy works hard because of me, but you work hard for lots of people." Victoria glanced at Marcus, something soft in her expression. "Your daddy works hard because he loves you. That's the best reason of all." Christmas came with unexpected gentleness. Victoria gave all her employees the week off, a rarity in tech companies where deadlines didn't pause for holidays. Marcus planned a quiet week at home with Emma, movies, hot chocolate, making the most of their small apartment that now had heat and enough food and all the small securities they'd almost lost. On Christmas Eve, a delivery arrived, 3 enormous boxes wrapped in silver paper, the kind of professional wrapping that cost more than the gifts inside probably warranted. The card was simple, written in handwriting Marcus recognized from documents Victoria signed. For Emma, from someone who enjoyed teaching her about coding, and for Marcus, because you deserve good things too, VC. Inside were gifts that made Marcus's throat tight, a complete beginner's coding kit for kids, with a tablet and educational programs. A set of winter clothes for Emma in her exact size, coat, boots, gloves, everything she needed. A gift card to the grocery store for $500. And for Marcus, a beautiful leather-bound journal with a note tucked inside. "Write down the good days, you've earned them. And Marcus, thank you for being there through the hard ones. You've given me something I thought I'd lost. Hope." "Victoria," Marcus called her immediately, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite control. "Victoria, this is too much. It's not nearly enough." Her voice was soft, warmer than usual, carrying something that might have been affection or might have been something deeper. You and Emma have become important to me, more important than I expected when I hired you. So please just accept the gifts and have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you, really. This means everything. There was a pause, weighted with words neither of them spoke. Merry Christmas, Marcus. Merry Christmas, Victoria. January brought the breakthrough. Marcus stood in the observation room during Victoria's 24th session, watching the same routine he'd witnessed dozens of times before. The therapist applied electrical stimulation to specific points along Victoria's spine and legs, systematically working through the protocol that was supposed to retrain her nervous system. Then something changed. The smallest twitch in Victoria's right foot, barely visible, just a flicker of movement that might have been involuntary. But the therapist's face lit up with cautious excitement. "Did you feel that?" Victoria's voice shook as she answered. I think so. I think I felt pressure, like something was there." Over the next 3 weeks, the sedation grew stronger. Victoria could feel pressure on her right foot, then her left. Light touch registered. Small movements became more controlled, less like spasms and more like deliberate responses to her commands. One evening in late January, Marcus stayed after hours to help Victoria with a presentation. They'd been working for hours, the office quiet except for the sound of fingers on keyboards and the occasional comment about slide design. The city beyond the windows had gone dark, lights twinkling in buildings across Manhattan. "Marcus, come here." Something in Victoria's voice made him cross to her desk immediately, concerned by the strange note he heard. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I want to try something." She looked up at him, vulnerable and hopeful in ways he'd never seen her. "Hold my hands." Marcus took her hands carefully, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin against his. "Okay, don't let go." And then with visible effort and concentration, Victoria shifted her weight. Her hands gripped his hard. Her legs, which had been still for 2 years, began to push against the footrests of her wheelchair. She was standing, wobbling, shaking, barely able to hold her own weight, but standing. Their faces were inches apart, close enough that Marcus could see the tears streaming down her cheeks, could feel her hands trembling in his. "I'm standing. Marcus, I'm standing." Her voice was filled with wonder and disbelief and joy so pure it made his chest ache. "You are, Victoria, you're amazing." She looked up at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them that had been building for months, something neither could deny anymore. "I couldn't have done this without you. Everyone else left, but you stayed. You saw me on my worst days and came back. You made me believe I was worth the effort." Marcus's heart hammered so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Victoria, I'm falling in love with you." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, before fear could lock them away. "I know I shouldn't. You're my boss. I'm still figuring out how to live after losing Lauren. This is inappropriate and complicated and probably the worst idea either of us has had. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. You and Emma, you've become the best parts of my days, and I'm terrified. But I needed you to know." Victoria's response was to kiss him, gentle and careful, a question as much as an answer, her lips soft against his. Marcus made a sound of surprise, then kissed her back with his whole heart, one hand moving to cup her face while the other kept her steady. When they broke apart, she was crying and smiling and still standing on shaking legs. "I'm falling in love with you too. I've been trying not to, but Marcus, you're incredible. You're kind and patient, and you make me want to be better. You make Emma light up when she talks about you. You've given us so much more than a job. What do we do now?" Marcus's voice came out rough with emotion. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out together." Her legs gave out then, unable to hold her weight any longer. Marcus caught her carefully, helping her back into the wheelchair. But she was laughing through her tears, giddy with the dual triumph of standing and confessing feelings she'd been terrified to acknowledge. "I stood. I actually stood." "You did, and you'll stand again. You'll walk again. I believe that." "I believe it too, because I'm not alone anymore." Marcus knelt beside her wheelchair, bringing himself to eye level. "Neither am I." The next morning, Marcus arrived at the brownstone with his heart still racing from the night before. Everything had changed. He'd kissed his boss, confessed feelings he hadn't fully acknowledged to himself, and crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The professional boundaries they'd carefully maintained for 8 months had evaporated in a single moment of vulnerability and truth. Victoria was already in her office when he arrived, dressed in a deep green suit that brought out the gray in her eyes. She looked up as he entered, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement of what had shifted, awareness that they were navigating entirely new territory. "Good morning." Her voice carried warmth it hadn't held before, like something had unlocked. "Morning. How are your legs feeling?" "Sore, but in a goody way, I think, like muscles remembering what they're supposed to do." Marcus set her coffee on the desk, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent electricity through him, a reminder that this was real and not some fantasy he'd conjured from loneliness. "We should talk about last night." Victoria's directness was one of the things he'd come to admire, her refusal to dance around difficult subjects. "I know this complicates everything. You work for me, which creates power dynamics we can't ignore. There are company policies about workplace relationships, and we both have histories that make this scary." Marcus sat across from her, the same chair where he'd given his desperate interview 8 months ago. "I don't want to stop working for you. This job means everything to me and Emma, but I also can't pretend I don't have feelings for you." "I don't want you to pretend. I'm tired of pretending, tired of keeping everyone at arm's length because I'm afraid they'll leave once things get difficult." Victoria's hands folded on the desk, steady despite the vulnerability in her voice. "So here's what I propose. We keep this private for now while we figure out what it means. We consult with our company lawyer about the proper way to disclose a relationship. And we take things slowly because neither of us can afford to rush into something that could destroy what we've built." Marcus nodded, relief flooding through him. She wasn't running. She wasn't ending things before they'd begun. "That sounds reasonable and smart." "Good. Now let's get to work, because the board meeting in 2 hours isn't going to prepare itself." They fell back into their professional rhythm, but something fundamental had altered. The air between them hummed with potential, with the promise of something more than just employer and employee. Every accidental touch carried weight. Every shared glance held meaning. Emma noticed immediately when Marcus picked her up from school that afternoon. She studied him in the rearview mirror with those two perceptive blue eyes. Something good happened today. Not a question. An observation delivered with the confidence of someone who read her father's moods better than he read them himself. "What makes you say that?" "You're smiling different, like when Mommy used to make your favorite dinner." Marcus's chest tightened. Lauren had been gone 2.5 years, but she still lived in these small moments. Emma's memories, the comparisons she drew between then and now. "I am happy, sweetheart. Work was good today." "Is it because of Miss Victoria?" The question hit with surgical precision. Marcus met his daughter's eyes in the mirror. "Maybe. Is that okay with you?" Emma was quiet for a moment, processing in that serious way she had. "I like Miss Victoria. She's nice to me and she makes you not sad anymore." "Mommy would want you to not be sad." Tears pricked Marcus's eyes. 6 years old and somehow wise beyond measure. "You're right, Mommy would want that. But you know that nobody will ever replace Mommy, right? She'll always be your mother, always be special." "I know. Miss Victoria can be someone new, someone extra. Hearts get bigger when you love more people. You told me that once." Marcus had told her that back when Emma had worried that getting a new teacher meant forgetting her old one. Now his own words came back to remind him that loving again wasn't betrayal. "You're pretty smart. You know that?" "Yep, I get it from you and Mommy." February gave way to March, and Marcus and Victoria navigated their new reality with careful steps. At the office, they maintained professionalism that would have satisfied even Margaret's exacting standards. After hours, when Emma was asleep and the world narrowed to just the two of them, they talked on the phone for hours. About their fears, their hopes, their past that had shaped them into people who understood loss. Victoria told him about the corporate retreat where her life had changed, the beautiful upstate property, the team-building exercise that was supposed to foster trust and cooperation. Her horse spooked by a snake in the tall grass, rearing up so fast she didn't have time to react. The fall that lasted less than a second but divided her existence into before and after. I remember lying there in the dirt, unable to feel my legs, thinking this couldn't be real, that I'd wake up and it would just be a nightmare. But then the paramedics came, and the helicopter ride to the hospital, and doctors with faces that told me everything before they said a word. Her voice carried the weight of that memory, 2 years old but still fresh. The first person to leave was my boyfriend, David. We'd been together for 3 years talking about marriage. He lasted 3 months before telling me he couldn't handle it, that this wasn't what he'd signed up for. My parents tried, but I could see the pity in their eyes. Friends stopped calling after a while because they didn't know what to say. Marcus listened without interrupting, understanding that these weren't stories she'd told many people. I threw myself into work because that was something I could still control. But even there, people treated me differently, like I was fragile or inspiring or tragic. Never just Victoria, always Victoria despite her disability, or Victoria overcoming her disability. You're the first person who's treated me like I'm still just me. You are just you. The wheelchair is part of your life, but it's not the entirety of who you are. I know that intellectually, but knowing and feeling are different things. You make me feel it. Marcus shared his own story in return, the depression that had swallowed him after Lauren died, the months where getting out of bed felt impossible, but Emma's needs forced him to function anyway. The guilt that still crept in during quiet moments, whispering that he should have noticed the headaches, should have insisted Lauren see a doctor, should have somehow prevented the unpreventable. I blamed myself for not saving her, even though logically I know an undiagnosed aneurysm isn't something you can see coming. But grief isn't logical. It's this weight you carry around, and some days it's heavier than others, and you just have to keep walking even when you want to lie down. Are you still walking? Victoria's question was gentle, giving him space to be honest. Most days. Some days I'm tired, but then Emma laughs or does something amazing, and I remember why I have to keep going, and lately you've made it easier. Like the weight is still there, but I'm not carrying it alone anymore. They talked about Emma too, about what it meant to introduce a new person into her life. Marcus was fiercely protective of his daughter, hyper-aware of how loss had already shaped her childhood. He wouldn't bring someone into her world who might leave and create another wound. She adores you. You know that, right? Victoria's voice carried surprise, like the idea hadn't fully registered. She's a wonderful kid, smart, kind, more emotionally intelligent than most adults I know. She gets that from her mother. Lauren was the one who could read a room, who knew exactly what people needed. I'm just trying not to mess up what Lauren started. You're not messing up. Emma is thriving, and that's because of you. In April, Victoria's parents came to visit from California. Linda and James Chen were successful in their own right. Linda, a retired surgeon, James, a professor emeritus of electrical engineering at Stanford. They'd immigrated from Taiwan in their 20s, built careers through determination and brilliance, and raised Victoria with expectations that felt like gravity. Marcus met them during a board meeting where they sat in as major shareholders. Linda was petite and sharp-eyed, evaluating him with the clinical precision of someone trained to spot weaknesses. James was quieter, but his gaze held the same analytical quality. After the meeting, Linda found Marcus in the hallway. "Mr. Hayes, a moment?" Her tone suggested it wasn't really a request. "Of course, Mrs. Chen. I understand you have been working for my daughter for 9 months now. That's longer than most of her assistants last." Marcus couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if this was heading toward praise or dismissal. "Victoria is demanding, but fair. I've learned a lot working for her." "Yes, she's quite taken with you, from what I can tell. Mentions you frequently during our phone calls." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes, what are your intentions regarding my daughter?" The question landed like a trap, weighted with implications Marcus hadn't prepared for. "I'm sorry, Don't play naive. I see how she looks at you, how you look at her. Victoria has been hurt before by people who claim to care. I won't stand by and watch it happen again." Marcus felt his spine straighten, a protective instinct rising. "With respect, Mrs. Chen, whatever is between your daughter and me is between us. But I can tell you that I care about Victoria deeply, and I would never intentionally hurt her. Intentions don't prevent hurt, Mr. Hayes. And a single father with a child in financial struggles might see my daughter's wealth as an attractive prospect. The implications stung, sharp enough to draw blood. I fell in love with your daughter despite her money, not because of it. Yes, this job saved my life. But I stayed because of who she is, brilliant, determined, kinder than she lets most people see. If you think I'm using her, then you don't know me at all. Linda studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Victoria said you had backbone. I needed to see it for myself. My daughter doesn't need another person who will fold under pressure or run when things get difficult. She needs someone strong enough to stay. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I haven't seen her this happy in years. Don't waste it. That evening, Victoria asked Marcus to stay late after Emma was in bed. They sat in her office with the lights dimmed, the city glowing beyond the windows. My mother interrogated you, didn't she? Victoria's tone was apologetic. She's protective. I understand that. She thinks every man who shows interest in me is after my money or sees me as some kind of charity case to feel good about helping. Marcus moved from his chair to kneel beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. I'm not interested in your money. If you were a teacher or a mechanic or anything else, I'd still feel exactly the same way. Because I'm not in love with your bank account or your company. I'm in love with you. Victoria's eyes glistened. My father wants to meet you properly. Dinner at their hotel tomorrow night. Fair warning, he's even more protective than my mother. Just quieter about it. Marcus's stomach tightened. Meeting parents felt significant, like crossing a threshold into something more permanent. I'll be there. Should I be terrified? Probably, but I'll be there too so you won't face them alone. The dinner was at a midtown restaurant that probably cost more per plate than Marcus used to spend on groceries for a week. James Chen was waiting when they arrived, standing from the table with the careful posture of someone who'd spent decades in academic environments. Mr. Hayes, thank you for joining us. His handshake was firm, assessing. The conversation started with neutral topics. Marcus's background, his experience working for Victoria, his thoughts on Chen Technologies' trajectory. But James was methodical, each question building on the last, constructing a picture of who Marcus was beneath the surface. Victoria tells me you're a widower. That must be difficult raising a daughter alone. It has its challenges, but Emma makes it worthwhile. She's the reason I keep going when things get hard. And what happens if things get hard with Victoria? If this relationship you're pursuing becomes more challenging than rewarding? Marcus met James's gaze directly. Then we work through it. That's what people do when they care about each other. They stay and figure it out instead of running at the first sign of difficulty. Many people say that. Few actually follow through. I know. I've watched people leave because staying was uncomfortable. But I also know what it's like to lose someone you love without warning, without choice. So when I choose to stay, I mean it. James nodded slowly, and something that might have been approval crossed his face. Victoria's hand found Marcus's under the table, her fingers intertwining with his. Dad, I appreciate your concern, but Marcus has proven himself over and over. He was there through my worst days, through the treatment process when I thought I might be putting myself through pain for nothing. He doesn't run. Linda spoke up, her tone softer than it had been in the hallway. We just want you to be happy, Victoria, and protected. After what happened with David, Marcus isn't David. He's nothing like David. Victoria's voice carried steel underneath. The dinner ended with tentative acceptance rather than enthusiasm, but Marcus understood that was probably the best he could hope for. Parents who'd watched their daughter's heart broken once weren't going to trust easily. In May, Marcus had a meeting with Chen Technologies' company lawyer about the proper way to disclose their relationship. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Reynolds, laid out the options with clinical efficiency. Given that Mr. Hayes reports directly to you, Ms. Chen, the cleanest solution is to restructure his position. He could transfer to a different department, report to someone else, or we could create a new role that maintains appropriate boundaries. Victoria's jaw tightened. I need Marcus in his current role. He knows my schedule, my preferences, how to anticipate problems before they become crises. Training someone else would take months. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. Then we disclose the relationship to HR and the board, make it part of the official record, and ensure there are checks in place to prevent any perception of favoritism. Regular reviews by other executives, transparent decision-making about compensation and assignments. It's workable, but it requires vigilance. Marcus spoke up for the first time. What if I took a different position entirely? Something outside of Victoria's direct supervision? Victoria turned to him, surprised. You do that? If it means we can do this right, without questions about ethics or professionalism undermining everything we've built? Yes. Patricia pulled up the company's organizational chart. There's an opening for Chief of Staff to the COO, similar responsibilities to what you're doing now, but you'd report to David Martinez instead of Ms. Chen. Same salary, benefits, everything. Different chain of command. Marcus looked at Victoria, trying to read her expression. Would that work for you? She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. If it means we can be together without compromising anyone's position, then yes. But I'll miss having you as my assistant. I'll only be 2 floors away, and we can still have lunch together. The restructuring happened over 2 weeks in late May. Marcus transitioned to his new role, learning a different rhythm under David Martinez's management. David was competent and fair, if not as brilliant as Victoria. The work was similar but shifted, more strategic planning, less day-to-day crisis management. Emma noticed the change immediately. Why don't you work with Miss Victoria anymore? They were eating dinner, chicken and vegetables Marcus had actually cooked rather than microwaved, at their small kitchen table. I still work at the same company. I just have a different boss now so that Miss Victoria and I can spend time together outside of work. Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Like dating. Are you dating Miss Victoria? Marcus's breath caught. They hadn't officially labeled what they were doing, hadn't discussed how to explain it to Emma. Would that be okay with you if I was? I already told you I like her. She's nice and smart, and she doesn't get mad when I ask a lot of questions. Emma pushed peas around her plate. But will she want to be my mommy someday? Or just daddy's girlfriend? The question revealed layers of fear Marcus should have anticipated. Emma had lost one mother already. The prospect of another woman in that role must feel both hopeful and terrifying. Hey, look at me, sweetheart. He waited until her eyes met his. Nobody will ever replace Mommy. She's always going to say your mother. Oh, I'm special. But if Miss Victoria and I keep seeing each other, she might become someone else who loves you. Someone extra, not someone instead of. Does that make sense? Emma nodded slowly. Can I still call her Miss Victoria? Or should I call her something else? You can call her whatever feels right. There's no rules about this. Okay, can she come to dinner sometime? I want to show her my butterfly collection. Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. I think she'd really like that. Victoria came for dinner on a Friday evening in early June. She arrived at Marcus's apartment in Queens, wheeling through the building's cramped entrance with grace that made the space feel less shabby somehow. Emma had cleaned her room 3 times and made a welcome sign that hung slightly crooked on the door. Welcome to our home. It's not as big as yours, but it's ours. Emma's formality was adorable, clearly rehearsed. Victoria smiled, genuine and warm. I love it already. Will you show me around? Emma gave her a complete tour, the kitchen where Daddy made breakfast, the living room where they watched movies on Fridays, her bedroom with the butterfly posters covering every available wall space. She explained each butterfly species with encyclopedic knowledge, and Victoria listened with the same attention she brought to board meetings. Marcus made spaghetti, nothing fancy but Emma's favorite. They ate at the kitchen table that barely fit 3 people, talking about school and coding and whether butterflies could see in color. The conversation flowed naturally, no awkwardness or forced cheer, just 3 people sharing a meal. After dinner, Emma brought out her butterfly collection. Not actual butterflies, but drawings and paintings she'd done over the years. Victoria examined each one carefully, asking questions about technique and inspiration. This one is my favorite. I made it after Mommy died because she used to say butterflies were like angels. Emma held up a watercolor of a blue butterfly, slightly faded but still beautiful. Victoria's expression softened. It's lovely. Your mommy was right. Butterflies are special. They transform completely, become something new while still being themselves. That takes courage. Emma nodded solemnly, then surprised them both by climbing into Victoria's lap. She'd never done that before, always maintaining the careful distance children keep with adults who aren't family. I'm glad Daddy has you. He was sad for a long time. Victoria's arms came up to hold Emma gently, and she looked at Marcus over his daughter's head with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. I'm glad I have both of you too. You've made my life better in ways I didn't know I needed. After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Victoria sat on the worn couch in the living room, finally alone. The evening had felt like a test, though not an intentional one. Seeing Victoria in his world, interacting with Emma in this space that held all his memories of Lauren, should have felt strange or wrong. Instead, it felt right in ways Marcus hadn't expected. Thank you for tonight, for being so patient with Emma, for not pushing, for just being yourself. Victoria leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. She's incredible. You've raised an amazing daughter. I had a lot of help from Lauren. Emma has her mother's empathy, her ability to see people clearly. Is it strange for you, having me here in the home you shared with her? Marcus considered the question honestly. A little, but not in a bad way. More like two parts of my life meeting and discovering they can coexist. Lauren would have liked you, I think. She always appreciated strong women who didn't apologize for taking up space. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I never want to replace her or erase her memory. She's part of who you are, part of why Emma is the person she is. I know, and I'm grateful for that. You're not trying to be Lauren, you're just Victoria, and that's exactly who I want. They sat in comfortable silence, the city noise filtering through thin walls. This apartment wasn't much, but it had kept them safe through the hardest times, and now it was expanding to hold something new. July brought another breakthrough in Victoria's physical therapy. She'd been standing regularly now, 5 to 10 minutes at a time with the support of parallel bars. But one afternoon, with Marcus watching from the observation room, she took her first unassisted steps, 3 of them halting and unsteady before the therapist caught her. But they were steps, real steps without support or braces, just Victoria's determination and months of painful work finally bearing fruit. Marcus was at her side immediately after the session ended, finding her in the recovery room where she sat processing what had just happened. I walked. Without anyone holding me up, I actually walked. Wonder filled her voice, like she couldn't quite believe her own body had cooperated. You did. Victoria, you're incredible. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face but smiling wider than he'd ever seen. I couldn't have done this without you. Every session when I wanted to quit, I thought about you and Emma waiting for me. I thought about having a future worth fighting for. Marcus knelt in front of her chair. You did this because you're the strongest person I've ever known. I just had the privilege of watching. No, you had the courage to stay. That's not a small thing. Victoria reached for his hand, gripping tight. I love you. I don't think I've said it clearly enough, but I do. I love you and Emma, and I want to build a life with you both. Marcus's heart felt too large for his chest. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes, because I know what it's like to lose someone you love. But I'm learning that fear isn't a reason not to try. They sat together in the recovery room, holding hands and dreaming about futures that had seemed impossible 8 months ago. By August, Victoria could walk short distances with a cane. Not far, maybe 20 or 30 feet before fatigue set in, but enough to move around her office, to stand during presentations, to meet people at eye level when it mattered. She still used the wheelchair for longer distances in difficult days, but she'd regained a measure of independence that transformed her confidence. One evening in late August, Victoria invited Marcus and Emma to dinner at the Brownstone. Not a casual visit, but something formal enough that Marcus wore his best suit and Emma put on her favorite dress. They ate in the dining room Marcus had never seen used, at a table that could seat 12 but was set for 3. Margaret had prepared the meal, chicken piccata that tasted like something from a restaurant, vegetables that Emma actually ate without complaint, dessert that made her eyes go wide. After Emma finished eating, Victoria stood with the help of her cane. Emma, I have something to show you upstairs. Would you like to come with me? Emma looked at Marcus, who nodded permission. They left together, Victoria moving slowly up the stairs that had been modified with rails and careful spacing. Marcus waited in the dining room, anxiety building. Something significant was happening, though he couldn't quite identify what. 20 minutes later, Emma came running down the stairs with excitement radiating from every molecule. Daddy, Miss Victoria showed me a room. A whole room that could be mine if we wanted. Marcus's heart stopped. Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs, descending carefully. I wanted to talk to Emma first before asking you, because this affects all of us. She reached the bottom, leaning on her cane. Marcus, I want you and Emma to move in. The third floor has 3 bedrooms. One for you, one for Emma, space for whatever you need. I know it's fast, and I know it's a big step, but I don't want to spend my evenings alone anymore. I want to come home to you both. I want us to be a family. Marcus looked at his daughter, whose face held such hope it made his throat tight. Then at Victoria, who just made herself completely vulnerable in ways she almost never allowed. Are you sure? Emma and I were a package deal, and she can be a lot. Early mornings, bedtime stories, random questions about butterflies at midnight. Your life would change completely. I want it to change. I want to wake up and have breakfast together before Emma goes to school. I want to help with homework and hear about her day. I want movie nights and holiday traditions and all the messy, wonderful things that come with being a family. Victoria's voice was steady, certain. I know I can't replace Lauren. I'm not trying to, but I can be someone who loves you both, who shows up every day and stays through the hard parts. If you'll have me. Marcus crossed the dining room and took Victoria's free hand. Yes. God, yeah. We'd love to move in. Emma cheered, actually cheered, then threw her arms around both of them in a hug that nearly knocked Victoria off balance. They moved in on a Saturday in September. Marcus's entire apartment fit into one room of the brownstone with space left over. Emma's new bedroom was twice the size of their old living room, with a window seat where she could read and built-in shelves for her growing butterfly collection. That first night, they ate dinner together at the kitchen island. Nothing fancy, just pizza that Marcus had picked up because nobody felt like cooking after a day of moving boxes. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement about her new space, about living in this beautiful house, about Miss Victoria being part of their everyday lives now. Can Miss Victoria read me a bedtime story tonight? Emma's question was directed at Marcus, but her eyes were on Victoria. If Miss Victoria wants to, that's fine with me. Victoria's smile was soft, surprised. I'd love to. Marcus cleaned up from dinner while Victoria and Emma headed upstairs. He could hear their voices drifting down. Emma showing off her newly arranged room, Victoria asking about the butterfly drawings taped to the walls, the easy conversation of people learning to be comfortable together. An hour later, Victoria came back downstairs, moving carefully without her cane. She's asleep, took 3 chapters of her butterfly encyclopedia, but she's out. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Thank you for all of this, for taking a chance on us, for being patient with Emma, for just being you. Thank you for staying, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for making me believe I deserved good things again. They stood together in the kitchen of the brownstone that was now home, holding each other and marveling at how far they'd come from that desperate interview 9 months ago. October brought Emma's 7th birthday. They threw a party at the brownstone, Emma's friends from school, a few of Marcus's former colleagues who'd stayed in touch, even Victoria's parents who flew in from California. Linda and James had softened over the summer, seeing how Marcus and Emma had integrated into Victoria's life in ways that made their daughter happier than she'd been in years. Emma wore a butterfly costume Victoria had bought her, complete with delicate wings that sparkled in the light. She ran through the brownstone with her friends, playing games and eating too much cake, her laughter echoing off walls that had been too quiet for too long. Victoria stood beside Marcus, watching the chaos with amusement. Is it always this loud when children are happy? Pretty much. You'll get used to it. I don't mind. It feels alive, like the house is finally being used the way it should be. Linda approached them, her expression thoughtful. Victoria, can we talk for a moment privately? Victoria glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragement, then followed her mother into the library. Linda closed the door, then turned to her daughter. I owe you an apology, and Marcus an apology, though I'll tell him separately. I judged him unfairly, assumed his interest in you came from financial motives rather than genuine feeling. Victoria's eyebrows raised slightly. That's very unlike you to admit you were wrong. Yes, well, watching you these past months has been educational. You're happier than I've seen you since before the accident. More yourself. And Marcus, he's good for you. He and Emma both. Linda's voice softened. I was afraid you'd be hurt again. After what David did, leaving when you needed him most, I became overprotective. But Marcus isn't David. He's stayed through things that would have sent weaker men running. That says everything about his character. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for saying that. Your approval means more than you know. Just promise me you'll hold on to this. Happiness is too rare to take for granted. They returned to the party, where Emma was opening presents with the systematic efficiency of someone who wanted to appreciate each gift fully. Books about butterflies, art supplies, a stuffed animal that looked remarkably like her old rabbit. And from Victoria, a laptop with coding software installed, an upgrade from the tablet they'd been using. This is the best present ever. Emma threw herself at Victoria in a hug that nearly knocked her over. Now I can make real programs, not just practice ones. Marcus watched his daughter with Victoria, seeing how naturally they'd learned to move around each other. How Victoria crouched down to Emma's level when talking to her. How Emma sought Victoria out when she was excited or nervous or needed a different perspective than Marcus could provide. This was what family looked like, not perfect, not without complications, but real and loving and worth every risk they'd taken to get here. November brought Thanksgiving, their first major holiday as a blended family. Victoria's parents came again, along with Margaret and a few of Victoria's closest friends from before the accident who'd stayed in touch. Marcus invited his sister from Boston, who'd been supportive through Lauren's death and the hard years that followed. The dining room table was full, conversation flowing around food that Margaret had supervised with military precision. Emma sat between Marcus and Victoria, contributing to discussions about everything from politics to science with the confidence of someone who'd learned her opinions mattered. When it came time to say what they were grateful for, Emma spoke first. I'm grateful for Daddy, who takes care of me always, and for Miss Victoria, who teaches me about computers and reads me stories, and for Mommy in heaven, who I think is happy we found each other. Her words settled over the table like a blessing. Marcus felt his sister squeeze his hand under the table, her eyes wet with tears. Victoria's mother wiped at her face with a napkin. Marcus went next. I'm grateful for second chances, for the possibility of rebuilding after loss, for my daughter who reminds me every day why it's worth staying in the fight, and for Victoria, who saw past my desperation to the person underneath and decided I was worth the risk. Victoria's turn came last. I'm grateful for people who stay, for Marcus and Emma, who've given me a family I thought I'd never have, for parents who love me even when they disagree with my choices, for friends who stuck around when things got hard, and for my body, which is teaching me that healing isn't about returning to what was before, but about becoming something new. After dinner, after the guests had left and Emma was asleep upstairs, Marcus and Victoria stood on the back terrace looking out at the city lights. November cold bit through their jackets, but neither wanted to go inside yet. I have something to ask you. Marcus's heart rate picked up at Victoria's serious tone. I've been thinking about this for weeks, trying to find the right moment. But I realize there's no perfect time. There's just now and us and the life we're building. She turned to face him, balancing on her cane. Marcus Hayes, I love you more than I knew I could love anyone. You've given me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. You've stayed through my worst days and celebrated my best ones. You've let me into Emma's life, trusted me with something precious and irreplaceable. Victoria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. I know traditionally men are supposed to propose to women, but nothing about us has been traditional. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner, Emma's stepmother, Someone who commits to showing up every single day no matter what comes? Marcus's throat closed up completely. He'd imagined this moment in vague, distant terms, but having it here, real and immediate, stole his ability to speak. Yes, God, yes, I can't imagine anything I want more. The ring was simple platinum, elegant without being ostentatious. It fit perfectly when Victoria slid it onto his finger, her hands shaking slightly. They kissed on the terrace with the city glowing around them, two broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right time. Not because they'd fixed each other, healing didn't work that way, but because they'd been willing to stay, to witness each other's struggles, to build something new from the pieces that remained. December flew past in a blur of planning. They decided on a small ceremony in February, just family and close friends, nothing elaborate. Emma would be the flower girl, wearing a dress with butterflies embroidered on the skirt. Victoria's parents would attend, along with Marcus's sister and a few friends who'd remained constant through the years. On Christmas morning, Emma woke early and ran into their bedroom. Marcus and Victoria's now, a space they'd learned to share with the awkward navigation of people building intimacy slowly. It's Christmas! Can we open presents? Emma bounced on the bed with 7-year-old enthusiasm that knew no boundaries. They gathered in the living room, where a tree stood decorated with ornaments Emma had made. The presents underneath weren't extravagant, despite Victoria's wealth. They'd agreed that Christmas should feel meaningful rather than excessive, focused on thoughtfulness over price tags. Emma opened her gifts with systematic care: more books, a butterfly kit for raising caterpillars, art supplies, and a framed photo of Lauren that Marcus had found in storage. He'd worried about including it, about whether it might seem strange to acknowledge his first wife on a holiday with his fiancée. But Victoria had insisted. Emma should know her mother is still part of this family, always. Emma held the photo carefully, tracing Lauren's face with one finger. I miss her, but I think she'd like that we're happy now. I think so too, sweetheart. Marcus pulled his daughter close, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel, without rushing past the complicated emotions. Victoria opened her gift from Emma, a hand-drawn picture of the three of them as butterflies, rendered with the serious attention to detail that Emma brought to all her art. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. This is beautiful. I'm going to frame it for my office. Really? It's good enough for your office? It's good enough for anywhere. Thank you, Emma. Marcus's gift to Victoria was last. A leather journal similar to the one she'd given him, but with an inscription inside, for writing down our story, past, present, and future. I know you've lost a lot, so have I, but I wanted you to have a place to record what we're building now so we never forget how far we've come. Victoria's hands trembled as she held the journal. It's perfect. You're perfect. Well, not perfect. Neither of us is perfect, but perfect for me. They spent Christmas Day quietly, breakfast together, a movie Emma had been wanting to see, dinner cooked with all three of them helping in the kitchen. Simple pleasures that felt profound because they'd both known what it was like to spend holidays alone, wrapped in grief. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus and Victoria lay in bed talking about the future. Do you ever worry we're moving too fast? That we've built this whole life together in less than a year? Victoria turned to face him in the darkness. Sometimes. But then I remember that we both learned the hard way how quickly life can change. How you can lose everything in a single moment. So why waste time being cautious when we could be living? That's a good point. Lauren and I took years to get to where we were comfortable sharing a bathroom. You and I just jumped in. Different circumstances require different approaches. We both knew what we were getting into, no illusions, no pretending the other person is perfect. Marcus traced patterns on her shoulder. I used to think loving again would feel like betraying Lauren, like I was supposed to stay frozen in grief as proof of how much she mattered. But that's not what love is. Love is a penny to make room for new people without pushing out the ones who came before him. Emma said something similar about hearts getting bigger. She's wise beyond her years, too wise sometimes, and they drifted into comfortable silence. The kind that only comes when two people have learned to simply be together without filling every moment with words. January brought the final preparations for their February wedding. Small details that somehow felt enormous: choosing flowers, finalizing the guest list, deciding on vows. They'd both agreed to write their own personal words that captured what this commitment meant to each of them. Victoria's physical therapy continued, though at a reduced pace. She'd plateaued at being able to walk about 50 feet with her cane before needing to rest. But she'd made peace with that. Some days were better than others. Some days the wheelchair was necessary, and that was okay. She'd learned that strength wasn't about conquering her disability. It was about living fully within its reality. On a cold February morning 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus woke early to find Victoria already up, standing at the bedroom window with her cane looking out at snow falling over the city. Couldn't sleep. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 2 years ago. When the accident happened, I thought everything good was over, that I'd spend the rest of my life alone because who would want to deal with my limitations? She leaned back against him. I was so wrong. The limitations are still there, but they're not the defining feature of my existence anymore. You and Emma, you've shown me that life doesn't end when circumstances change. It just becomes different, sometimes better in unexpected ways. Marcus rested his chin on her shoulder. I thought the same thing after Lauren died, that I'd used up my quota of happiness and the rest was just survival. But here we are, about to get married, raising Emma together, building something I never imagined possible. Do you think Lauren would approve? The question was tentative, like Victoria was afraid of the answer. I think Lauren would love that Emma has another strong woman in her life, that I found someone who challenges me and makes me better, that we're not just surviving, but actually living. He turned Victoria to face him. You're not a replacement for what I lost. You're something entirely new, someone I chose with full knowledge of what love is and what it's worth. That makes what we have even more valuable. The wedding took place on a Saturday in late February at a small venue in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. 40 guests, mostly family and a few close friends. Emma stood at the front in her butterfly dress, holding a basket of flower petals and taking her role with the utmost seriousness. Victoria walked down the aisle using her cane but without assistance, each step deliberate and hard-won. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that managed to be elegant without being ostentatious. Her parents sat in the front row, both openly crying. Marcus waited at the altar in his best suit, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was real. This was happening. After everything they'd both been through, they were choosing each other with eyes wide open. The ceremony was short, focused on the vows they'd written themselves. Victoria went first, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Marcus, you came into my life when I'd forgotten what it meant to let someone see me, really see me, past the armor and the achievements and the wheelchair. You stayed when staying was hard. You treated me like a whole person instead of a problem to solve or an inspiration to admire from a distance. You've given me a family I didn't dare hope for and a future that feels limitless despite all the limitations we face. I promise to love you through bad mornings and good days, through challenges we can't anticipate and joys we haven't discovered yet. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the mother Emma needs. I promise to stay. Marcus's voice broke multiple times during his own vows. Victoria, I came to you desperate and broken, a single father with nothing to offer but honesty about how badly I needed help. You saw past the desperation to the person I could be again. You gave me more than you gave me purpose, partnership, and a reason to believe in second chances. You've loved my daughter like she's your own, honoring her mother's memory while creating new traditions and new love. You've taught me that healing isn't about returning to who we were before, but about becoming someone new, stronger because of the breaking, not despite it. I promise to be your partner in every sense, to support your dreams, to stay through difficult days and celebrate the victories. I promise to love you exactly as you are while supporting who you're becoming. I promise to stay. The officiant pronounced them married, and when Marcus kissed Victoria, Emma cheered loud enough that everyone in the room laughed. They walked back down the aisle together, Marcus, Victoria with her hurricane, and Emma between them holding both their hands. The reception was relaxed, more like a family dinner party than a formal event. Emma danced with everyone, her butterfly dress twirling. Victoria danced with her father, moving slowly but moving nonetheless, tears running down both their faces. Marcus danced with his sister, who whispered in his ear that Lauren would be so proud of the life he'd built. Late in the evening, when most guests had left and Emma had fallen asleep on a couch, Marcus and Victoria stood together looking out at the river. We did it. We actually did it. Victoria's voice carried wonder. We did, and now we get to do the rest. The everyday parts, the boring parts, the parts where we're just a family living our lives. Those are the best parts, the ones Lauren and I never got enough of. Marcus pulled Victoria close. I'm grateful for every ordinary day we get. Every morning Emma wakes up too early, every dinner where nobody wants what I cooked, every evening where we're too tired to do anything but sit together. That's the life I want, the beautiful, messy, ordinary life we build day by day. Then that's what we'll have, together. They stood wrapped in each other's arms, watching the city lights reflect off the water, two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the aftermath, who'd learned that love doesn't prevent pain or erase the past, but makes the present worth living and the future worth building toward. Emma stirred on the couch, waking briefly. Did I miss anything? No, baby girl. We're just getting started.